welcome. Thanks for being here. If you've come this far to be right here, thank you. And I hope that you get a lot out of this training because the whole point of it is being able to help you stop going through the healing hamster wheel and being able to actually just fucking chill and figure out where to from here. And a big part of this training is essentially going to be able to give you some different perspective of maybe why it isn't working. So, straight off the bat, you think that you're working with your inner child, but what if that's not the part running your life? So, what I mean by that is if you've done some work on yourself and if you found me, hopefully that means that you are at a certain level that has done quite a bit and now maybe looping or maybe considering that what is the next step in this thing? Or maybe questioning why isn't any of this bloody shit working for me? And if you've been lucky enough to work with the wounded child or the inner child with a good enough therapist or coach that gets that, then great. It's definitely really important and really, really helpful. But I believe that they might have missed something, and therefore you've missed something. And why healing or isn't potentially working or feeling integrated or getting to that point of freedom is because we might have missed a really significant part of us that actually protected that wounded inner child. So, we are going to break it down and understand the wounded, the adaptation from that wound, then the abandoned, and then the reclaimed selves that make us up as a system. So, that is a lens I'll be working and looking through. Hopefully, you can stay in tune and keep up. The truth that bends minds for the clients that come and start working with me into trauma work that's done properly in a way that actually creates the true freedom and the authentic self that we deserve is that people think they're working with their inner child and can then start to support that inner child. But if that's not who's leading, if that's not who's running the show, then I'm missing the mark. I'm pretty much parenting that wounded inner child and giving myself what I need, but then missing the other component of it. So the one that you might have forgotten is the one who had to take over because no one wants to be wounded. So when we're wounded, the natural progression of survival is figure out how to survive, figure out how to adapt so we don't continue to be wounded. So a natural healing process based on behaviors and coping mechanisms. Now, this next model will hopefully break that down a little bit more. I call it the trauma triangle within. This is how I best sort of explain it. Let's say you've got a wounded child, right? This is when whatever experience has gone on, the event, the experience that's actually just made the wound sort of open. So it might be less than, might be being too much, it might be being too dependent, it might be seen as small or little or being ashamed or attacked or whatever it might be, which had a big impact, creating a little bit of a wound. So the wounded child is the one who's been impacted, which is really where a lot of work can be done. But when we are wounded, the natural thing to do is to figure out how to adapt because no one wants to be wounded. So then we move over in this triangle into the adapted teen, I like to call it. So essentially, what it is the one who had to take over the adaptation. So we split off from the wounded child and step in front of. I describe it to my clients as this is the wounded child here, and I don't want to get hurt anymore. I step in front of that and have my adaptation, which then is this little teenager almost looking outside of the world, figuring out how to protect and make sure that nothing happens to the wounded child. So they will do what it takes to protect this wounded child. So from that place, who's supporting this protector, the defense? Because if no one shows up, then they're going to keep doing whatever it takes to protect the wounded child, which, as you can imagine, because the adaptation is based on what a child knows best how to do, isn't as functional as it might be, especially if we haven't had a good family system where we're getting really beautiful modeling of how to be, right? So I will explain some examples in a slide above. But the more that that teenager is figuring out how to keep the system safe, the more they aren't getting their needs met. So essentially, we then have an abandoned teen. So, what happens when the teen leads too long? Now, how that might show up, I'll explain in the next slide. But essentially, we don't want to be on this triangle. We need something to help break this cycle and something that's going to be able to make sure that none of this starts to leak out everywhere. So, this is why the work might not be working because we're not actually being available in the way that this part of us needs. We might have learned how to be with the wounded part of us, with love and compassion and um, really being able to meet them and nurture them. But maybe the adapted teen who's a bit more of a controller or a fixer or a helper or a perfectionist doesn't need that sort of experience. And therefore, we just keep enabling this teen to protect this wound. And they run the system as best as they can. Let me break that down. So, we got the wounded child, the one who was impacted. They're powerless, unsafe, they are shamed for their needs. Maybe they were blamed for having feelings. I needed care and I didn't get it. So this wounded part gets frozen in time. It starts to collapse, be very overwhelmed and overrun with how big that experience might have been. But you work hard not to go there. So we will do what it takes to not have to be in that wound, right? I think that makes a lot of sense because another part had to step in and stand between the wound and the pain. So no more pain is allowed this way. We've got a strong teenager looking externally outward to make sure that no one comes in and impacts that wound. So if we come down to how that sort of splits, as we then have the adapted teen, the one who stepped in to survive, who took over, who learnt that based on this wound, so I don't keep getting wounded, is I might have to hide, I might have to avoid, I might have to numb. Or the flip side of that, I might have to figure out how to control. I might have to get really good at perfecting things, or I have to just make sure that I have my walls up and I disconnect from others. So they might have said, I don't have a choice. I have to do this alone, or I have to figure out how to survive. If I disappear, if I over deliver, or if I sabotage everything, I won't get hurt. What a beautiful idea. What a beautiful way to adapt, right? But you can see its dysfunction. And if you maybe pause and think about how is this playing out for me now? Am I being my reclaimed system, my functional self, or am I still showing up maybe doing a bit of this? Now, how the adapted teen works out is that you didn't just abandon the wounded child. As we grow up and we've worked on the wounded child, we're kind of coming home to them and learning how to meet their needs in the way that they weren't met before, which is beautiful. But what we also did is abandon the one who adapted. And a lot of the times we parent the wounded child or the adapted teen like it's the problem. So if I'm always controlling, I might hate the fact that I control. So they they too never got to be seen, but you became them. The adapter runs your life and you never met them with compassion. So essentially, you can't stop now because whatever you're doing is working. So the abandoned teen is still the adapted teen. It's just while it still continues to run the show, there's no adult, there's no reparenting, there's no true self that comes down and lets them off the hook because, boy, they must be tired being the perfectionist, being the controller all the time. So, what we need to move into is the reclaimed system where reparenting happens. We can reparent this wounded child, this inner child, perhaps, but what does the teen need? Because it definitely doesn't need to be abandoned. It needs to be shown up for so it doesn't have to work so hard and do the same adapted shit that maybe doesn't serve us anymore, right? So we need to stop bypassing the wounded child. We need to stop identifying as the adapted teen. And we need to reconnect both to an adult, our adult. I see the one who was hurt. I see the one who had to survive. And I'm here now to lead from truth, not trauma. Let me keep breaking this down for you. Again, the wounded child, the one who was impacted. They were unsafe, too much, never met with care. These are just examples, not always 100% true. Then we had to adapt, the one who survived for the both of you. They took over, they avoided feeling. Maybe they overachieved, maybe they controlled everything. How the adapted shows up is you didn't just abandon the child, you left the adapter behind as well. So now she might run your life, but has never been truly met and is still terrified. So if you are controlling, perfecting, fixing, people pleasing to this day, and then not showing up to love and care for that part of us, then they're going to keep operating in exactly the way that they know how to adapt, right? So unless we get them off the hook, allow them to put down the shield and no longer have to fight this fight, they're going to keep defaulting into protecting the system. So what needs to happen is the change. We need to meet the child, not just analyze her in the mind and understand her. We need to sit with the teenager, not just be led by her. Oh, let's just control it again, right? We need to become the functional adult. We need to reparent. We need to reclaim this. It's the one that can hold both. The teenager on this side pulling you, going like, let's just control the situation. Maybe if we just people please our way out of it. And then the wounded who's there feeling really vulnerable, powerless, helpless. They are informants that can come up here and take over and control. And we don't want that. We want to be informed by them, and we want our true, authentic self to be the leader, right? Let me break this down a little bit further, and this will be in your PDF if you keep watching till the end. So, step one, awareness. How is this showing up right now? What's the issue that might be still circling where you don't feel like the healing is working for you? Where are you still getting stuck? So, what emotions keep rising? What's the loop that won't resolve, right? For me, it's anger, right? So, I get angry at my partner. That anger is looping around, and I always react this way when I'm not heard. So, we meet the part doing the work. Ask, what part of me is leading this work? Is it trying to prove, fix, or control? What's it afraid would happen if I stopped? So for me, if I use anger as an example, the part of me that is leading this work isn't the wounded part of me, because the wounded part of me doesn't necessarily lash out and try and control and be reactive and resistant. That would be the hidden, scared, powerless, helpless, right? So it's clearly an adapter. It's clearly my teenager fighting for us to be seen and heard. And they're trying to control the situation so they can stay safe. And what's it afraid would happen if it stopped is that we won't be safe, that we'll get rejected, we might get abandoned. So being angry is a very strong coping adaptation that will help our system survive from their perspective. Obviously, it has costs and consequences. Step three, the reenactment reflection. How do I treat myself when this part shows up? So when I get angry at my partner, what happens after that? Do I push it down? Do I shame that it happened? Do I abandon it emotionally? Am I relating to this part the same way I was parented? Right? So what I mean by this is we have to start to look at when I am angry, the aftermath of anger. Do I blame or shame the shit out of myself? You fucking got angry again, you piece of shit. How dare you, and exile and punish that part of me for existing? When, as I've just said, it makes perfect sense that anger is there to keep me safe. So then do I parent that part of me how I was parented? Yeah, my anger got shut down. My anger got misunderstood and silenced. So how I reenact it is I do the same thing. I don't have any compassion. I don't have any acknowledgement. I don't have understanding for the part of me that's angry. So what do I do now? Step four is I reparent. So I invite the functional adult, the true authentic self that I want to be. What does that part of me, that teenager, actually need? Well, they feel unsafe. So they're getting really, really angry. So they need to feel safe. They need an outlet for some of these big feelings. So, what pace, tone, or truth would help it soften? Just notice how I'm even speaking, right? Already. This is a practice that allows more of this. We start to then go, hey, I see you. Like we're talking to a teenager on a different level. You're never meant to do this alone. I totally get why you're angry. You've done so much to protect us. You don't have to keep proving your worth here. It's okay. There's not as much danger as you think. But then we're sort of able to move on. This is another sort of way of breaking it down. So, the wounded child, the experience was hurt, shame, or left. So, the core wound might be I'm too much or I don't matter. The adapted teenager obviously wants to step in because I don't want to be too much or don't matter. So, they took over to survive. And now I need to keep going or we won't be safe. I need to do whatever it takes to matter, right? The abandoned adapted. Um, so, what's the adapted teen becomes when she's never relieved of duty? It's all on me. No one's coming. This is the only way I can operate. Or I have to get angry because if I don't get angry, no one else is going to come and support us. So, if I don't be perfect, no one's going to come. This is the trap. So, we need our parent to step in. So, again, adapt teen is like, let's be better, let's be useful, let's fix it now. The wounded is, please just help me not feel this. So naturally, we want the adapted part of us naturally to step in and try and fix it. But neither of these is functional. We need us to be like, hey, we actually don't have to fix any of this. I'm just going to sit with this little boy and own that we feel crappy. If this sort of thing is really helpful for you, then I want you to really get into the PDF and I want you to deepen what you can do within yourself and then your healing. And eventually, we can come in and actually know where to go from here in terms of healing. So, the work beneath the work, when we get to the guts of it in my programs, we deepen acute awareness. When we get really aware of some of the stuff and why it makes sense, we need a lot of compassion, not this critical way of maybe talking to us in that inner voice that comes out. And then with that comes protection. So we need intuitive protection instead of instinctual protection. As you can see, when we bring these two things together, we've got reparenting. When we bring compassion and awareness together, we get inner attunement, how we meet each other, how we meet self. Awareness and protection is boundary clarity. This is the deepening of how we can then lead and experience life moving forward. If you'd like to deep dive into understanding this a little bit more, please subscribe to our emails. We get lots of different emails, or come and directly work with me in any of the ways that you want. Keep following along on Instagram. Thank you so much. Let me know if this was helpful or if this landed or if you need any clarity on any of it at all. Thanks.